What's up guys, Luke here, back with another installment of the Hidden Knowledge interview series. In this installment, we're going to take the psychotherapy approach on how to optimize yourself, as I interview Dan Gaylinn, a PhD in clinical psychology and a well-established practicing psychotherapist. He also has a master's degree in transpersonal psychology, which is a branch of psychology that looks at human potential. In this first video, we get to hear about Dan's background. He explains how to integrate yoga and psychotherapy for self-development, as well as he explains how to start getting yourself out of negative situations where you feel stuck. Because we cover a lot of ground, I've added chapters to these videos to make them easier to navigate or to pick out the parts that interest you. Just see the description below for a list of the chapters, or click on the chapter name below the video and you'll see a playlist to the left. All right, here we go. So I wanted to do some interviews here and kind of get some insight from you guys and just kind of thoughts that you've developed and get some of that onto the internet.
I'm happy to. Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, I'm a practicing psychotherapist here in San Francisco, and I studied at the Institute for Transpersonal Psychology. It has since been, renamed Sophia University, but the Institute for Transpersonal Psychology is sort of a branch of psychology that looks at human potential, among other things. And so that had always been an interest of mine. Stumbled upon works by Ken Wilber in college that sort of introduced me to the field, and then realized there were a bunch of scholars who were pursuing this in a rigorous way, and the whole history of the humanistic psychology movement that sort of gave rise to this in the late 60s and 70s at places like Esalen. You also, what they discovered at that time, I think in some large part, was that these maps had really been drawn in ancient spiritual traditions for human potential. And we're now, I guess, bringing the light of reason and rationality and science. More accurately, we're quantifying and putting numbers to a process that ancient practitioners had really been working from, the Stoics to the Buddhists and other spiritual traditions that were cultivating the mind and body.
Right. Ancient concepts and putting that modern process to it.
Yeah, modern process, modern science, quantifying it, publishing it, renaming it, a lot of repackaged, material, new wine, same wine, new wine skins.
If they're good ideas, I guess it's good that they're repeated, right?
Yeah. It's brand new again. And so, that kind of thing informs my life and my work, practicing Vipassana meditation and bringing the insights of that practice, meditation and mindfulness, coupled with cognitive behavior therapy and existential psychology into my practice, into the psychotherapy practice, really.
Just going back to the beginning, what made you intrigued by studying all of this, like from the base level? What was the inspiration for putting a lot of effort into developing these ideas and working with them?
It's hard to put my finger on it exactly, but I think that, I don't know if it was so unique to me. I think that everyone is somewhat curious about what they're capable of. I myself was on a ski team, and I struggled with anxiety, in middle school and high school, and I think some of that sort of filtered into some, anxiety in the race course. When I was a sort of competitive ski racer in high school, very amateur, but still, competitive. And a lot of that has to do with being in the zone, getting into the right headspace and visualizing yourself making the turns and sort of shifting your body weight and really being in that flow. And we had a coach who was hip to this kind of stuff and brought in a teacher who hypnotized the entire team as part of our. And so that was the first time I really kind of got firsthand experience, other than maybe seeing it on TV or,
Right. So you were part of the ski team, and as part of, like, you had like a weekly session with this hypnotist, or
it
how
wasn't
was that structured?
it was more, periodic. And, I was immediately sort of intrigued. I mean, and I felt different after an initial session. I felt like I felt a noticeable shift, and I continued to use it without the teacher there. I would visualize a run, or a race before stepping into the gate, and you know, I didn't do any pre and post measures to assess how effective the technique was, but I felt better about it, and that was
You
really
could feel it. You could, right, like you could feel yourself being more in the zone when it was crunch time.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, and that helped, and so that was sort of the first sort of entree into that world, and I started studying neurolinguistics and how some of these techniques were used conversationally in like sales and persuasion, and
Did you have any experiences like that similar to the hypnosis one, where you're like, whoa, this technique really made a difference? Or
I felt different. I would practice with friends. I was pretty explicit about it. I said, I'm learning this really cool technique, and would you be interested in it? And some of my friends were like, "That's weird," and others were like, "Yeah,
well,
let's
that's the
try
common
that."
that's the common response to a lot of this, right? Like a lot of this stuff, it seems like mainstream society is not really wanting to fully accept it and to fully internalize it. They always
Mm-hmm.
see like there's just main body of people that are thinking about this stuff as like, oh, that's just hocus pocus, and it's not, it's not really worth paying any attention to. And if people are trying to convince you of it, they're trying to manipulate you, or they're lying, or they're just fooling
Mm-hmm.
themselves. How did you think about that in the beginning? So when you were just learning this stuff and you were just kind of realizing the results and seeing the experiences, when you were met with that initial resistance from all of your, say, your friends,
Yeah.
family, social circles, how did you react to that?
It's a good question, because I think that, I don't know if this is just part of my personality or what, but once I'm sort of onto something, then like other people's sort of ridicule or shame just makes me more curious about it. Like, why? What's
Right.
so wrong about it? What's
What are you
what's the big
protecting?
deal? Sorry.
What are you protecting?
Right, exactly. What are you protecting? Like, yeah, what's like a third rail? Like, I'm not supposed to talk about that. Oh, let's talk about it. Or whatever.
So it was kind of a contrarian mindset that you
A
had
little
in the
bit,
beginning then.
iconoclastic. I mean, that was sort of like a typical kind of story in my family, that like when I would be told what the rule was, I would sort of stand right on the edge of it and see, like, is this a real rule, or what if I cross it? What happens? What actually happens? So I think it's just part of my personality, to sort of
It's
find
good,
those.
right? Exercising free thought. So that's
I
something
think
we
a
all
little
should
bit
do.
of that. As with so much of free thinking, it's always a balance between thinking for yourself and then finding like-minded people that will sort of support you in that. And I think that is just part of the human condition to some degree, is that balance between thinking for yourself and I mean, because reality is in some ways a consensus. I mean, that's one of the issues of hypnosis. And really what I came to understand about this was that hypnosis is in some sense a way of describing the rule or the fact of the matter, that we are living with a particular lens or filter on the world, and mine happened to include one that you could sort of see hypnosis as a viable tool. And um, those who were sort of contrarian to that idea happened to be living in a paradigm or a worldview that didn't include it, but it didn't sort of negate the fact that like there is a kind of reality tunnel that people operate in, and that words have an impact on how that reality tunnel is shaped. Like when I work with clients and I help a client sort of put words to an experience that they struggle with, there's a kind of relief there. I mean, oh, there's a name for that, and just naming it helps.
Just being able to label it and put it into a category, it makes it easier to work with.
Yeah.
Say you're in a situation where you are very ingrained in a mindset of thinking like, if I can't see it, then it's not real. And you have, friends and family around you that are kind of putting you in this box of, let's say negativity, or let's say a certain mind frame that you're not satisfied with. And you haven't been exposed naturally to any type of this hypnosis or these type of techniques. What would you say would be the first step for someone to start embracing an idea of having this as a potential solution?
I mean, I like to come back to describing what the experience is in and of itself, right? Just what are the sensations? How would you describe it? What is your experience of it? And we have to identify what is the it that is really at issue here. Is it this sense of feeling sort of outcast and unaccepted, that there's something wrong with you, that you have unacceptable ideas or feelings or aspirations? Then what's that like? Let's talk about it. Let's validate it. Like and appreciate that. Regardless of what other people think or say about it, you are having this experience, and by allowing yourself room enough to have the experience in and of itself may give you clues as to what can be done about it, what steps to take, and there are various ways of doing that. Like, I encourage clients to journal or, meditate, or we'll do some kind of, what's called focusing in the psychological sense, which is to sort of tune into the sensation, the experience of the sensation in the here and now. How does this experience manifest in your body? What are the images that it evokes? And sort of breathing life, or giving room or attention or just awareness, the light of awareness to what's going on. Maybe there's a thread that you can trace back to a time in which you felt that as a child, and there was some particular circumstances in which the feeling was compartmentalized as one thing or as unacceptable, and that you made a choice in order to deal with a difficult or uncomfortable situation at a younger age that you're now having to reconcile from a new vantage point of where you are now in your life, as an adult, or as someone who's gained more life experience and more wisdom, and you have a little bit of perspective on that. And it's I don't want to say it's too delicate, but you kind of have to pace a person's ongoing experience. You can't come at them with a sort of a whole new sort of reality model and say like yours is wrong and this is right. You have to. Humans are sort of will affiliate with the familiar, and then with a certain amount of stress tolerance, will be willing to accept novelty. Will make room for and otherwise too much novelty usually generates stress and lockdown and retreat and reactivity, right? And this is one of the reasons why I like to work with meditation, because there's a kind of an implicit resource state that's involved in practicing sustainable meditation, of being in a good state of mind or in a peaceful state of mind in the here and now, and maintaining it and sustaining that state regardless of what is happening.
Right. So it's just like the idea of slowly building up the feelings of contentment and happiness
Yep.
and the positivity
Yep.
over time, and
Yep.
kind of mixing that in with your current state to not overwhelm your
Yep.
system, and so it doesn't start to
Yep.
reject it.
Yep. Yep. And hopefully over time you develop a kind of tolerance for what I call uncertainty, or novelty. That's a little
Right.
bit, unknown, mystery, and come to realize that that is another sort of fact of our condition, is that novelty is in some ways part of life, right? Not part of living at, in a living being is constantly changing, and there is no, sustainability or predictability. We create situations in which we impose a kind of predictability, where there's, days of the week and months in the year, and we're keeping track, and but from the sort of the direct experience of the living organism, there's no novelty. There's nothing but novelty. That's what I want to say, right? It's constant change, constant flux, and so like
Right.
this moment is the only moment we're in, and then once it's gone, and there's just this fleeting ribbon of time that we're living through,
Right.
and there's a lot of relief in that in some degree, because it's like what's past is past. And maybe there's some letting go of baggage, that it's like, well, I have to take the lessons and let the rest go. I can't hold on to it. I can't bring it into the present or the future. And that's
so it's just being very steady with the fluidity of life and the change of life, and realizing that if you're stuck now, it's not going to be the same thing in the future. All you have to do is just move your mind, move your consciousness with the flow of time, and
and being facile in that, being able to sort of, and so I realized that I may be contradicting something I had said a couple minutes ago about like the mental rehearsal of visualization in the flow state, because what you're doing is you're preparing for an event that cannot be predicted, right? But
I guess your reaction and the way that you're embracing that is what you want to be practicing.
Exactly.
And that's what the
state that you're rehearsing.
The inner feelings of like how you're gonna adjust to the unknown. That's what the skill of meditation is building.
In many ways, yeah. And I mean, I call it the shortcut. That like most people think of meditation as very time consuming and tedious, and it takes years to see any progress, and I'm just sitting there doing nothing, literally doing nothing. But compared to a lot of the psychotherapeutic techniques that I learned in my training, that to me seems tedious. Like the cognitive behavior model of taking a person's now, there is a usefulness in these techniques. Oftentimes, it's the tool that you can't just bring meditation in. You have to understand how people are processing their words. But with cognitive behavior therapy, you're really, in many ways, sort of deconstructing their language and their words to reveal how there's some irrationality in the system. There's some emotional distortion or cognitive distortion that they're using to bring coherence to their experience, rather than thinking rationally, and rather than being in the flow of time, being in the flow of their experience, and being facile to
And are you finding that a lot of the, like when you sit down with a client, a lot of that deconstructing is kind of trying to bring them back to that sense of having of their consciousness being in the flow of time in the moment versus all of these kind of pre-programmed things. Is that kind of like the general connect there between
That's
like, if you can practice the skill of just keeping yourself in the moment and keeping yourself, engaged with the flow of time, you can let go of all of this baggage and all the kind of things that you feel are holding you back and putting you in this rut.
Right.
So a lot of what you're doing, I guess, in the psychotherapy realm is like just looking at, listening to a person's thoughts and feelings and emotions and trying to break that apart. So it's fluid enough that it kind of just flows down the stream of time.
Yeah. Right.
Wow.
Right. And you know, and show them how they don't need to be holding on to that baggage. In fact, it's weighing them down. It's preventing them from from living more fully in this moment. Right.
Right. Okay.
Now that there is some kind of allowance for, it's a bit of a balance, because you don't want to sort of encourage suppression of the person's experiences or their memories or their feelings, right? Like, right. So that's where it gets to be somewhat tricky. It's a bit of a middle path. It's like, how much of this is sort of just exacerbating and commiserating, and how much of this is really, valid, and like they haven't ever been able to talk about this with anyone. And so finally getting it off their chest will be the thing that enables them to let it go.
Right. I hope you enjoyed the video. So, what do you think about combining yoga and psychotherapy to level yourself up? Let me know in the comments below. In our next video, we're going to talk about overcoming fear and keeping a state of flow. Until then, remember, do what makes you strong, stop doing what makes you weak.